Coming up on this week's show, it's a family affair as we talk California comedy with Suzanne Brockman, Ed Gaffney, and their son, Jason T. Gaffney.
Welcome to the Big Gay Fiction Podcast, the show for readers and writers of gay romance fiction. If you can read it, write it, watch it, or listen to it, these two guys are going to talk about it. Now, here are your hosts, Jeff Adams and Will Knaus.
Welcome to episode 89 of Jeff and Will's Big Gay Fiction Podcast. I'm Jeff from JeffAdamsWrites.com.
And I'm Will from WillKnaus.com. This week's episode is sponsored in part by listeners just like you. We will have more information on how you can help support this show in just a few minutes. Happy Pride, everyone. It's the third week of Pride Month.
Yes.
I know there are people out there celebrating. The celebrations are just getting started in New York.
Yeah, Pride Week has started in New York.
Mm-hmm.
I saw some groovy things from Denver yesterday, and I believe Detroit yesterday as well.
Mm-hmm.
It's very cool.
Yeah. Good stuff.
So, some things to tell the good folks this week. We're a GRL featured blogger again. We're very excited to participate in that program. Once again, that gives GRL featured and supporting authors the chance to do some promotion on various blogs and our podcast leading up to the retreat in October. You'll start to see these segments come into the episode starting with episode 91 on July 3rd and running until GRL week on October 16th.
Mm-hmm.
Good stuff.
Yeah. Lots of great stuff coming up, and we will be talking at length about it very, very soon.
Oh, yes. More GRL than you could possibly want, perhaps.
Yes, exactly. We want to wish congratulations to Kenneth. He was the winner of our Sweet Summer Fun paperback giveaway. Kenneth, your books are on the way.
Yes, indeed. The Tony Awards were this past Sunday.
Yes, they were.
We watched the program in our typical fast-forward style. But we're not going to talk about it this week, just to confuse everybody. We're actually headed out to New York middle of this week for our theater trip. So we're going to hold off on Tony Awards talk until we're back. So we'll talk all about that and what we saw in episode 91 in just a couple weeks.
Yep, all sorts of theater coming up really soon. But first, before we do that, let's talk about Patreon.
Let's do that.
Yes, we want to give a great big shout out and a great big thank you to all of our newest patrons, Luann, Megan, and AE.
Hello.
Welcome to the family, guys. You can help support the Big Gay Fiction Podcast with a monthly pledge through Patreon. For as little as 25 cents an episode, your pledge helps pay the cost of producing and distributing this podcast. Now, for those fans who pledge at the silver and gold levels, you'll have the exclusive opportunity to ask questions of our upcoming guests. If you're a patron and you'd like us to send you a Pride Month thank you, please go over to Patreon and send us a private message, and that way we can get your snail mail address and send you out something before the end of the month.
Send you a little something special.
Yeah. So you can get all the details on how to become a patron at patreon.com/biggayfictionpodcast. That is patreon.com/biggayfictionpodcast.
Did you know that podcasts love to get reviews too? Taking a moment to leave a review about the Big Gay Fiction Podcast helps us with the show's visibility online. Please take a moment to visit iTunes and leave a review. Your comments help other readers of gay romance discover this show. Thanks for helping us spread the word about the Big Gay Fiction Podcast.
So as part of our interview with the Brockman-Gaffney clan, we got to read the latest in the California comedy series, Fixing Frank, in advance. Now, that book comes out this Tuesday, June 20th, and it is a delightful romantic comedy. I really liked it, and I'm going to throw it to Will to actually tell us about the book, because we all know he does the descriptors much better than I do.
Fixing Frank is the third book in their California comedy series, and basically it's a series of short novellas, and they're sort of styled after romantic comedies, fun, light romances. And in this particular case, Fixing Frank is about two guys who meet on a reality show. It's about Terry, the nice guy teacher, and Frank, the nice guy landscaper. And they have both agreed to take part on a reality show called Fixing Our Future.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, so they both end up on this reality show, And when they show up for the first day of filming, they look at each other and it's like, oh God, not him.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, because Terry and Frank have a bit of a past with one another. Terry's ex and Frank's ex left them to be together. So when Terry and Frank see each other, it's like, oh God, him. I mean, understandably, they don't like one another because of the painful memories of awkward breakups. Anyway, so they end up being paired for the first challenge of this reality show, and things go crazily awry, as they would do in a romantic comedy.
Of course.
Now, this particular show is not on broadcast television. It is an internet reality show. So, what they end up doing is they end up taping a segment, or the challenge, and then the episode airs almost immediately the very next day. After this first challenge, the episode airs online, and everyone goes crazy for Frank and Terry. They think they are the most adorable couple ever. They nickname them, I believe, do they call them Tanky?
I think so.
Terry and Frank, Tanky. So they become the internet darlings by being on this reality show. And it causes a bit of a hubbub, which brings the show and them to the attention of their exes. Now, Terry's ex is actually a wealthy owner of a tech company, so he comes and joins the show as a sponsor. Mm-hmm. And he shows up at an event with his new boyfriend, determined to make Terry feel awful. And Frank sees this and is having none of it. So he insinuates that he and Terry are now a brand new happy couple. And it causes all sorts of problems. And wackiness ensues. So Terry and Frank go from like hating each other to being sort of reluctant allies in order to make their exes jealous and to get farther on the show and win more money for their respective charities. And then, of course, through the course, they get to know each other better and, of course, fall in love. I love this book so much, mainly because it's very funny. The two main characters are very sweet, very kind, and smart, and it also contains one of my favorite tropes of all time, the sort of relationship of convenience. Mm-hmm. The sort of... Help me out.
Marriage of convenience. There's also the forced proximity going on because of the reality show. Plus some pretty good enemies to lovers going on there too. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I loved it as well. I thought the reality show setting was really good. I like the wacky challenges they came up with to put these guys through. And I'll admit, I mean, I know it's a romance. I know there's got to be the HEA in there. Mm-hmm. And yet I was really stressed at the end, wondering exactly how they were going to fix the big whammy at the end. So I loved it. I loved it to pieces. So we've got the chance for you to win the first 2 books in the California Comedy Series. Just go to the show notes page for this episode and go to the Rafflecopter at the bottom of the page, and you'll be able to get entries so you can get in to win those books. Now, in the first part of this interview, we talked to Suzanne about her history writing MM characters, which started back in her Troubleshooters series. And then we move on to talking to Jason and Ed, along with Suzanne, on the collaboration they had for California Comedy.
We're excited for a podcast first as we welcome a family to the show. We've got Suzanne Brockman, her husband Ed Gaffney, and their son Jason T. Gaffney. Suzanne is the New York Times best-selling author of more than 50 novels, many of which fall into the romantic suspense category. Ed is an Edgar Award-nominated thriller author and screenwriter. Jason is an author, actor, and screenwriter. Together under their production company, Small or Large Productions, they produce movies, including The Perfect Wedding, which they all co-wrote. In addition, Jason and Ed co-write the California Comedy series of MM romance books, which are released under the Suzanne Brockman Presents banner. The latest book in the California Comedy series, Fixing Frank, releases this week on June 20th. And for those on video, Suzanne just held it up for us. Welcome, everyone.
Hi. Thanks.
Thank you. We're happy to be here.
So we'd like to start with some history.
Going back to 2007, Suzanne released a book in the Troubleshooter series called All Through the Night that saw the wedding between FBI agent Jules and actor Robin. Now, that was groundbreaking at the time for mainstream romance, and the book became the first MM to hit the New York Times hardcover fiction bestseller list. How did that book come about that you were able to pull that off?
Well, it goes back, way back, even before 2007. Ed and I became connected, well, actually, Ed, Jason, and I, all three of us, became connected to an organization called Mass Equality. And this is a group that had been around for a while, LGBTQ rights with a focus on marriage equality. And the story kind of really starts when Jason was in high school and he was home sick, right, Jace? What you
Yep.
take it? Take it away, Jason.
So I was sick, probably like just the man flu or something pitiful, and somehow I ended up watching the Massachusetts version of C-SPAN because I actually think I was watching random TV, and I think Mom, you came in the room and were like, "Turn it to the C-SPAN.
It's possible.
We have to watch." And then I started watching it, and I was completely shocked because I had no idea that I couldn't get married. I was out by this point. I was 16, 17. I was already out, and it didn't occur to me that I couldn't get married to the man of my dreams when I met him, and that these people were having a fight. There were words exchanged by people on the floor.
On the floor of the State House in Massachusetts. So this was, hot C-SPAN action going on. It was just like riveting and awful and heartening at times, but awful at times.
Yep. And
So-
yeah.
So Ed, take it away.
Yeah, the way I remember it, I'm not exactly sure of exactly what Jason saw exactly when, but I do know this. When in Massachusetts in 2004, the state Supreme Court ruled that our Constitution allows gay people to get married. It would be an infringement of their constitutional rights to not have them get married. I don't exactly know what happened with Jace, but I do know what happened with the Massachusetts legislature. Immediately upon that ruling, people in the legislature started an effort to amend the Constitution, to basically take away the right of gay people, to get married. It was around this time that Jason became aware, as did I. Jace came out a few years before that, and I never crossed my mind, gay people married or not married. I mean, if you'd asked me, I probably would have said, I guess they can get married. I don't know. I never thought of it. Jason was, 16 or 17? Well, the minute he found out that there was a time when he couldn't, and then when he found out there were people trying to take away the right to get married, he got furious, understandably. And the three of us immediately got activated.
In fact,
we became political activists from that minute forward.
Yeah, some of our protest signs or actually they weren't really protest signs. They were more like "Proud to live in Massachusetts" signs are behind.
Those are historical documents back there. Susan and I were marching around the Massachusetts State House with these signs around this time. So this is like 2004, 2005, 2006, and then in 2007 we thought we'd won. We had beaten back just about every legislative effort that had been put forward to amend the Constitution. And we found out, no, we got to do it one more time. And this time, out of the 200 people in the Massachusetts state legislature, we had to get 150 votes out of those 200 to support gay marriage. And it was an all-hands-on-deck thing, because if we didn't get this, then it was going to go to a statewide referendum, and it was just going to be bedlam. I mean, Massachusetts was going to be suddenly,
brutal.
Ground zero for every crazy nut job and his busload of crazy nut job cousins coming into Massachusetts with their ugly signs and their hate and the whole circus. So that's when Suze got an idea.
Yeah, and we had been doing all kinds of activism, from the, candlelight vigils to the sign carrying protests to working for local politicians who supported equality. Ed did canvassing, knocking on doors, house to house, to say hello, meet me, and let me tell you why I believe my son should have the same right as your children, and it takes a lot of something to go door to door, and it's not my strength. And I remember thinking, oh my God, we'd had the party celebrating the fact that we'd won marriage equality in Massachusetts, and now suddenly we were, getting this conference call from Mass Equality and the leaders of that organization saying, get out your candles and your signs because we're not done. And I had just finished writing the book Force of Nature, where Jules and Robin, these two kind of characters that have gone throughout the series, they kind of achieved their happy ending, and it was a little bit of a surprise to me. I didn't expect to have that happen in that book. So I knew I wanted to write another book with them, and for many years, readers and my publisher alike had been pressuring me to do two things. One was to write a holiday book, some type of Christmassy story, and the other was to write a wedding. And I tend not, since I write romantic suspense, I tend not to write the actual. We don't see the characters get married, and I suddenly thought, I have a wedding book. Here's the story that I want to tell. And right now, it's legal in Massachusetts for Jules and Robin to get married. So they're going to come to Massachusetts to do this. The story's going to be set there. And I knew, too, that Mass Equality needed a lot of money, and they needed it right away. So I pitched the idea to my agent and telling him, we need to make this deal. It's got to be a standalone book. I'm going to give the rights, all of my proceeds, sub-rights, all of everything, every penny I earn from this book is going to go to Mass Equality until the end of time. It's still going to Mass Equality. But this is what I do. I write stories. I write books, and this is something that I can bring to this emergency situation that is a little bit unique, and will hopefully keep me from having to knock on too many more doors. So that's really where it came about, and the publisher was excited about it, and Mass Equality was really excited about it. In fact, they used, it was a six-figure advance that I got for that book that I immediately got to them, and they used that money to make a commercial, a TV ad that was. Ed, you remember it, right?
Yeah, it was a hockey player. I can't remember whether he was a college or high school hockey player, and he's just a kid, just a Massachusetts kid, right? And he's talking about his family, and he's a hockey player, and it's totally towny type guy, and then he introduces you to his moms, who are up at all hours to drive him to hockey practice. And it was just one of those perfect ads that, the whole campaign for protecting marriage rights in Massachusetts was centered around educating everybody, mostly the legislature, but anybody that would listen, to the reality that LGBT people are people. Everybody's the same. This is just nothing to, make laws about. We are all the same. And there's a lot of people that just didn't get that. They knew gay people, but they didn't know that they knew gay people. They had this image of what gay was, and it was completely crazy.
And once commercial allowed us through mass equality to knock on millions of doors at the same time. So the work that Ed was doing was kind of amplified by like here Massachusetts, meet this charming young man and his moms and see how we're all the same. So it was really cool that they were able to do that with with that advance money from this book. And
was Ballantine on board from the beginning to go that route? Or, I mean, this was still 2007 when, MM didn't cross too much into mainstream romance.
Yeah, well, I had already, I had already published several. Jules Cassidy was my most popular character ever in my out gay FBI agent, and Ballantine was aware of that, and the book Hot Target, where Jules first meets Robin, and there's a steamy kiss, and there's a subplot between these two men, and we when that book came out, I think it was 2003 maybe, but when that book came out, we were worried that maybe even our team at book club wouldn't review it because they didn't do that, and we just really didn't know. It was a mainstream romance. I mean, the main characters, it was MF, but we really didn't know what to expect. And I had, in anticipation of this, after Hot Target came out, and I started to get the reader response, I copied every readers saying, "Oh my God, I love Jules. I love this story with Robin, and we want to see more Jules, and I made copies of all the emails. I redacted people's personal information, but I created this. I actually printed it out because I wanted it to land on my publisher's desk with some amount of heft. So I compiled all these thousands of emails that I got into this printed thick book that I sent to my editor, I sent to my agent, and I sent to the head of Ballantine Books, so that it would land boom on the table, and they would see the response, because I knew that the noisy haters can be really noisy and awful, and the 1-star reviews and that type of the publishers could get really rattled by that, but they don't. I knew that the people who were writing to me, the readers, that the publisher wasn't going to hear that unless I passed it along, and so that was kind of my plan with Hot Target, and they were very reassured by that, and
sales were reassuring too.
Yes.
Hot Target sold very well. And Jules was her reader's favorite character. Every time she went to a book signing, was the first question she got was, "Will we be seeing more of Jules?"
Yeah, and Hot Target went on to be Borders' best-selling romance hardcover of the year. It was the top seller, and that was so I got a this like reward thing, or award, not a reward, but it was a thing, and it's Borders, they're gone now, but it was the best selling romance of the year. So that was reassuring to them too. My editor has been completely on board from the very start. I've worked with Shauna Summers at Ballantine for years and years and years and years and years, starting my category romance days, and so she kind of knew where I was coming from. But yeah, so that's kind of that's kind of where it started with all through the night, actually, with Jules and Robin having their own book. But the whole the fight for marriage equality the story has a really happy ending for our family in particular.
Yeah, I got married last year, so.
Did you go to Massachusetts to do it?
No, we stuck around in California. Matt's family, my husband Matt, his family all lives out here, and it was warm and tropical, and so we figured just
It was awesome. I always said, you know what? I am going to dance at my son's wedding. And I danced at my son's wedding. It was the best. It was the best wedding ever. It was awesome.
Best wedding ever.
That's awesome. Did you, as a teenager, Jason, how did it feel to have parents as activists? Was it awesome, or was it like, oh, please, don't do that?
There are times when I feel like, it was awesome. I'll start with that first off. And there are times that I feel like their activism gets kind of eclipsed by my level of activism, because I can get super passionate about it. And, in particular, any sort of group that is marginalized, I tend to be right there to stand with them, because every group that's marginalized, if we don't stand together, then we all lose. And it's like, so it's, I'm going to be there for women. I'm going to be there for Muslim people. I'm going to be there for Black Lives Matter, because they were there for me when I was fighting for marriage equality. And so
it's the right thing to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. Yeah. And so it's the kind of thing where, like, I learned from them to be as loud as I am, because we need to be. In this day and age, we need to drown out the hate. So. Yeah,
particularly now. Absolutely. Yeah. Now more than ever, it seems.
Yes.
So I think back to the books we're talking about here.
Yeah.
Last summer, you guys, Jason and Ed, you debuted the first California comedy book with Creating Clark. What was the inspiration behind this series for you guys?
So, it's no secret, obviously, at this point, that I had a great coming out experience. I had parents who were super accepting and on my team, and there was no, the biggest drama of my coming out was that there was no drama, and I was kind of like, oh, that's it? Okay, fine. Sure. And you should all be so lucky, right? And at the time, I was kind of just shocked by that. And there are a ton, and there should be a ton, because there's still so many areas of this world and of this country where coming out is a big deal, and there are safety issues. And my firm belief is, if you cannot be safe, wait until you can find a place where you can be safe and then be out, because it's not like, don't lose your life. But one of the things that I felt was lacking in not only gay cinema, but in the gay romances and gay books, was it seemed like the majority of characters had terrible coming out stories, or they had like a huge trauma with coming out, or they had to come to terms with themselves. And I was lucky. I never really had to come to terms with myself. I just always was myself, and my parents were always like, "Be you, you're great." And so I wanted to start, like, there's more and more people as we progress that are starting to have the coming out story that I've had, which is the parents are like, "Yeah, awesome. Don't forget to do your homework." And like, make sure that when you bring them home, you leave your door open and stuff like that. And I wanted to start writing stories where the focus was more just on a world where people were all on board with gay people, and it was just kind of like, yeah, so what? As long as you guys are happy, I'm happy. And that's kind of where the California comedy series kind of took off.
And what was the impetus to bring on Dad as a co-writer?
So I feel like, for me personally, I'm really good with ideas, and I'm really good at kind of vomiting it out. And he's really good at polishing whatever I vomit out.
Oh, that's so poetic.
Yeah. I'm gonna ask for a different title than Vomit Polisher.
Yeah.
But generally, Jace writes the first draft, and then I've had more experience as a writer than Jace, and so he writes the first draft, and then I polish. Actually, he doesn't write the whole thing. This is a kind of a fun process that evolved for us. Jason Suze, she's had so much experience writing romance. She's written over 50 romances, and most of her books have multiple story arcs. So she has subplots. So she's written over 50 romance novels, but she's written probably close to 100 romantic stories. So she's got an unbelievable wealth of experience in that storytelling, arena. So Jason and Suze talk about ideas that he's got, and she helps him with her perspective, and they outline together. And then Jace gets started, and he writes, I don't know, let's say, I can't remember, how many thousands of words do you write before you send it to me?
Like 4,000 to 5,000.
So he'll write maybe, let's call it 3 or 4 chapters, maybe 2 or 3 chapters, and then he sends it to me, and then he keeps going. And I polish what he's written. So I'm sort of coming behind him as he goes forward. I'm coming behind him. And so by the time, I don't know, we move pretty quickly. By the end of a month and a half, we have a first draft.
When what's cool is the characters start and they're kind of like block figures, and he starts to polish them, and I read what he's done, even though I'm already 3 more chapters ahead, and I'll start to adjust them to funny little like catchphrases that he put in there, and I'll be like, oh, that's great, it's a great catchphrase, let's add that in. And so it almost becomes an avalanche by the end, because I've started to mirror the polishing he's done, which helps him not need to spend as much time with the polishing. So by the time we get through to the end of the draft, I feel like it's a pretty solid piece. And then it allows us to go back and just fix any of the tweaks, any of the things that we missed, and tweak things and kind of expand from there.
I think that that part of the guys come from a screenwriting background, so writing is it tends to be more of a collaborative thing, and there's a certain amount of speed involved that is impressive. And having worked together before writing The Perfect Wedding, that was, I think that, so it's a familiar thing too, to have this kind of, this teamwork, and I think it just works really well. They're a good team.
Is the dynamic similar with the novel writing as it is to your screenwriting, or is there a little bit of a different bent to it?
You mean when we collaborate?
Yes.
It's very similar. Very similar. I mean, we've done it with The Perfect Wedding. We had a slightly, it was just a little bit of a different order. The 3 of us came together with the idea for the story. It did started from Jason's, just a sort of a general feeling of like, I love romantic comedies. I love comedies. And I love seeing movies with gay lead characters. But I don't see a lot of gay romantic comedies where the comedy isn't coming off sexuality. For Jason, there's nothing funny about being gay. Nothing not funny. It's just being gay isn't funny. It's not a source of humor. And so, that doesn't mean that comedy can't be developed that way, but he was just interested in doing it a different way. He just wanted to have lead characters, a couple of guys, boy meets boy, boy loses boy, boy gets boy. Period. Make it funny, make it sweet, make it romantic, and so we came up with an idea that we thought fit that bill. This time I was the first draft writer. So I wrote the first draft. I inserted a subplot about Alzheimer's because my mom died of Alzheimer's, and I wanted to include a romantic subplot between older people in the story. And as I wrote, Suze and Jason read and polished and reacted, and that's how that one came about. But it was
reactions.
Yeah, it was always very noisy. There's a lot of, like, Jason and I tend to be
enthusiastic.
Yeah.
Passionate.
Like, like, they're like, no. So it can be noisy. It's a noisy process, but that's okay.
And now with all of you in different states, I imagine loud Skype conversations that can happen as well.
Yeah.
That's right. Phone calls, a lot of phone calls.
Yeah.
What's your role, Suzanne, in the California comedy series? There was a little bit of talk about working through the initial plot ideas with you, but then where did you kind of feed back into it because you, as noted, you've got the romance experience.
Yeah. Well, I was kind of I'm kind of as Ed put it earlier, I'm kind of involved at the very beginning and then at the very end. So I really like the kind of plotting and brainstorming and knowing, like, having Jason say, okay, here's the story I want to tell. What's the best way to tell it? How do I convey this? And with the understanding that what we are creating here with this line of books is basically a line of male category romances. So what we want to do, we're looking for the familiar romance tropes. We want to tell the stories that have been told a bazillion times, but in male-female books. But we want to be able to allow Jason and young men and all people to see their reflection in books that are set in a world where the characters don't carry a lot of trauma with them about their coming out or there's the conflict does not deal with sexuality, so trying to fit the stories into those kind of traditional romance tropes and so things like, if Jason's saying, well, I wanted to write a story where like for Fixing Frank, there's these two guys and their exes have run off together, and so there's all this, they're at odds and they blame each other and there's a lot of anger and they have reason to find it difficult to be around one another, and so good, let's throw them together and make them fall in love, and I immediately thought, as he was talking about this, let's use the marriage of convenience trope, where we have to, our two characters are forced to be together and forced to pretend that they're in a relationship. What better torture for those characters? So with my kind of experience, having written a bazillion romance novels and being really familiar with the tropes So that's where I kind of play in at the beginning, and we talk a lot about character. We talk a lot about structure and revealing and motivation. And then the guys go off and do their noisy writing, their fast and noisy writing. It's amazing. And I come in at the end and I read the book as an editor, and I give them revision notes and I say, okay, but you know what? What if you could twist it here? And why don't we make it go a little bit deeper here? And I give them that feedback, and they do a revision, and then they send it back to me. And when we're finally all three satisfied, I'll do another copy edit, and then we'll send the book out to another copy editor so that we have a non-family set of eyes on the thing, and then it goes to Grandma to proofread. And I'm serious about that. It really does. My mother used to proofread. She used to freelance proofread Playbill back in the day, and she says that Jason and Ed's romances are way more interesting. He's 80, 85, 86.
So, Suzanne, it's funny that you mentioned the sort of relationship or marriage of convenience trope. I've recently been reading a couple of books with that very specific trope in them, and I have come to realize that as like my total jam. I cannot get enough of those kinds of stories.
It's awesome, isn't it? It's just
love them to pieces.
Yeah. It's so awkward and it loud. It's well. I've always said, okay, so what are you going to do? You're going to create characters. There's two people, and if you're writing a romance novel, you've got two people, and they're going to collide, and they're going to clash, and they're going to discover a lot about each other and themselves as they eventually fall in love, and they earn their happily ever after. And the thing you want to do as a writer is you want to torture your characters in the most torturous, awful way possible. So you're really gonna, you really want to find what makes them vulnerable and grind their face in it, and because then that allows the reader to see how they rise above and they overcome the difficulty and the connection, the real true connection between those two characters is just that much more sweet. And as they work through that torment.
I love it. I love that trope too, Will. I think it's perfect. It's perfect for romantic comedy because as long as you create the characters well and you create a pair of people that at least superficially are going to have a lot to argue about and to be complaining about. You force them, however, into physical proximity. So the sexual tension is automatic. They're attracted to each other. They cannot escape each other. So that sexual attraction will add to the tension, which is driving them bananas. And some of the greatest Hollywood movies are, now I'm not sure that they're marriages of convenience, but that conflict, Hepburn and Tracy, Cary Grant and whoever, those actors could bring that off with such skill and charm, and when the writing's good with such humor, it's just I love it. So Fixing Frank was just man, it was a ball. Once we got these characters rolling, it was just let them go.
And for the comedy standpoint as well, it's basically a bountiful harvest because when I did improv, when I was doing improv training at the Upright Citizens Brigade, I had an instructor say, okay, in that last sketch that you guys were doing, one of you said, I don't like buses. What I want to now see is that person forced onto a bus because I want to see their overreaction of how much they hate this inanimate object that has no, it's not going to hurt them. It's not going to do anything to them. And I want to see the irrationality of it because that's where the humor will come from. And so when you've got a teacher who's trying to not have a potty mouth and then you put him with a guy who every other word is a swear and you stick a camera in their face, it's just like it's a powder keg ready to blow. And anything you do, it would be hard to not find something hilarious for them to stumble upon. That thing.
We've both read Fixing Frank, and in fact, before the interview segment, we'll have reviewed it on the show, and to let people know what it's about. And I think the use of the reality show to force these people together and force them to have to behave a certain way because of the cameras and the crew who are always there, and then you add that they kept opening their mouth and dropping another little bomb onto the other about where things were going to go. It just kept ratcheting up that comedy factor so well. You must have had a great time coming up with the challenges for the reality contest as well.
I just imagined what I would want to see as a viral video and what would make me happy. Because I will be that person that sits on YouTube for 2 hours, literally just going for like videos that people fail at something and giggling because I have a twisted sense of humor. And so, yeah, so anything where the, like, you know, getting cold paint thrown on you and screaming and trying really hard to not swear, but you can see in their face, oh, they want to swear. That's hilarious to me. The angrier someone starts to, the irrationality, and then it tumbles downhill from there. And I love that.
Mm-hmm. Now, Jason and Ed, you spoke to your collaboration process earlier in sort of a screenwriting form. When it comes to these California comedy books, do you guys spend time fleshing out the characters and working on the plot beforehand, or is it more like maybe improv based? Because these books are, you know, very grounded in the ideas of romantic comedy. So I'm wondering, do you plot heavily before, or do you just sort of like start writing and go wherever it takes you?
When we plot, I should say, my mom and I plot heavily, and then I send it to my dad, and I go, "This is what we're writing." And he goes, "Okay," and then and then I start shooting pages at him at rapid pace, and so it's heavily structured, and yet, like, once we figured out that Frank had a mouth on him, then my dad, I'm going to speak for you, but I feel like that was when you really, you started firing out jokes for Frank left and right in an improv way, but it was just like, it was rapid fire, and suddenly Frank really became this more three-dimensional character. So it's like I would say it's like a combo of heavy structure at the beginning with the fluidity of, okay, if he's going to change, we'll just change with him, and that's fine.
Susan and Jace are really, really careful to plot the book out, and then as writers, it's really important. It's a major responsibility for the writers to make sure that the characters, once the characters are established and you feel good about them, that the choices that they make in the book are consistent with their character. Mm-hmm. So if something has already been plotted out, and, you know, 3/4 of the way through the book, you're expecting, you know, the plan was for them to do X, Y, and Z, but by that time, the characters have evolved to the point where X, Y, and Z wouldn't make any sense. We have plenty of leeway to shift so that we maintain the characters. They do not. The plot is not like, it's established in the beginning. It's clear. We know where we're going. But if there's something that doesn't, you know, if the writing process brings us to a point where sticking to the outline would be not true to the character, the outline loses. The characters win. We know they're going to end up together. We'll get them there. But and they have a strong idea of where they're going in the beginning, but if we find that we have to take a detour, we take a detour.
And Suze, is that kind of where it comes back to you at the end, where you're making sure that they kind of mind the typical romance beats as they go, if they end up deterred from that initial plot a little bit?
Yeah, and because there are elements too of you know, having written so many books and been doing this for so many years, you don't want, we never want to have the romantic storyline. We don't want to we don't want to give it away too soon that these two people are going to actually make this work out. Because you think about it, I mean, it's a romance novel. Of course they're going to get together. But you still want to, as a writer, create the feeling of tension and the possibility that they're going to fail and that they're not going to connect. And so when you have you want to make sure that your characters don't give in to saying "I love you," for example, too soon in the book. That has to happen right at the end, or almost practically at the end. And so there's a balancing act there. Like make sure that things could still go south right up until the very end. So those are kind of the things I'm looking for. But like Ed and Jason were saying, it's the character is the most important thing. And I think that it's interesting because Jason, as a writer and an actor, really brings an interesting kind of spin to his writer part of the process. And so working with him, we talk a lot about like, well, how would you play this character, and what would you be thinking, and what kind of backstory would you develop? Like, because if you think about it, an actor who gets a job, even in a really small role, creates a backstory for their character. So that's something that Jason is really familiar with, and I believe as a writer that if you're going to make your character, in order to make a character true and realistic, you as the writer have to know where that person came from. Where did they start out? What was, what drives them? And so a lot of times when I'm talking with Jason about the ideas he has in the book that he wants to write, we do get into these interesting kind of comparisons between writing and acting, and it's just been really, really fascinating to kind of get inside his head and see how the actor's brain can really bring a little special something to the writer.
Interesting. I had never really considered that aspect of things as transitioning between the different crafts.
Yeah, it's really interesting.
As you geared up to kind of write the gay romance books, did you read what was out there in the market already, or did you just kind of jump off of, the knowledge of the MF market already and go from there?
Yeah, no, I did check out what was in the market. I put a couple of like Twitter and Facebook pleas to people out there being like, send me your favorite authors, and just to try and latch on to like the best of the best and just see what they were doing that was making them the best of the best, and what was making them funny, what was, like, I specifically was asking for romantic comedies, and I wanted to just get a feel of like, okay, so they use that that kind of voice, or they're going that kind of direction with description, and that's like, and I can see why that really works for them. I know that wouldn't flow from me naturally, but I really like what they did. How can I like find my own way of saying that type of thing? And it was really useful to do that and read them, because it got my brain going in that direction, as opposed to the normal like script brain, where it's really mostly about the lines. You want to avoid as much description as possible and let the actors have the most fun trying to say the words. And like, if I write a weird sentence, if a character's if I write a weird sentence for a character, sometimes I'll read it out loud to make sure that it would come out naturally, because what might be grammatically correct wouldn't be what someone would say, that they wouldn't. I am going to go to the office now. It's like, yeah, okay, you said that correctly, but that's so uncomfortable how you said it. And so reading the what?
I was just going to say that I think that we've all been readers for years, and I have, I've read a lot of I'm a real big fan of Alexis Hall, and I know I'm actually friends with some of the editors over at Riptide Publishing, and so I'm familiar with what's going on out there. So we did, we took a look at what was out there to some degree, but Jason, again, was really definite about the type of stories that he wanted to tell, and
while I'm falling in love with these books, I had yet to find someone where both characters were out and happy, with maybe the exception of I want to say it was called Shiny by, I think, Amy Lane.
Mm-hmm.
And that one, both characters were out and happy, and I was really excited about that, and I really enjoyed that book for that, and really wanted to see how that worked and how that fit. And but I also fell in love with the author Josh Lanyon, which he does not write comedy at all. It's very dark, and it's mystery, and it's thriller, but it was also really fun to read about, two FBI guys similar to Jules, and just see that story and stuff. But yeah, so finding those people out there, like that, it was hard to find more stories like Shiny. Hang on, let me check my Audible.
yeah,
Because I did like Shiny, and I remember the cover of it, what it was.
But while he's checking, I did want to say that I felt confident in Jason's storytelling ability. I read Glitterland. I think Glitterland is one of the best books I've ever read. Never mind whether it's a gay romance or a romantic comedy or whatever you want to say. I just love that book. But I didn't feel like I felt confident enough in Jason's storytelling ability and in Suze's storytelling ability and her experience to feel like what he writes is, there's going to be an audience. I don't know exactly what it's going to be, but there's going to be somebody that enjoys this. And so I was just looking forward to it. I was happy for him to do whatever research he wanted to do, but I was kind of just looking forward for him to just jump into the pool, just start doing it and see what happens.
Mm-hmm. I found the story. It was actually called Sean's Law by Renee Kay, I believe I'm horrible with pronouncing names. I apologize to you, Renee Kay, if I mispronounced your name. That was the one where I remember both of the gentlemen were out to their family, and there was no issue in that regard. Shiny was also awesome, but I believe one of the characters does come out, and that's part of the story. And so Sean's Law was the one where I was like, whoa, it's a book, and there's conflict, and it's not about someone coming out. And so that was exciting. But because I was having such a hard time finding those, I was feeling like, okay, here's a niche we can hit. And I want to encourage us to move forward to a future where that is the case, where it's where eventually we don't need coming out stories anymore because no one really needs to come out because it doesn't matter. And it's or if you do come out, it's not a painful, scary process. I want the world to be yeah, you're who you are, you love who you are. Your eyes are blue, great. Your eyes are green, great. Same thing.
In Somewhere on Mackinac by Jeff Adams, Jordan Monroe travels to Mackinac Island for the Somewhere in Time fan celebration weekend. Once there, he becomes attracted to local stable owner Miles Coulter. When Jordan learns the stable's in trouble, he wants to help despite Miles's resistance. As their relationship grows, he dreads the issues that face them. Can they forge a love as timeless as the romance in their favorite film? Find out in Somewhere on Mackinac by Jeff Adams. Available from DreamSpinnerPress.com, Amazon.com, and other ebook retailers. So just a reminder again, we've got the chance for you to win those first 2 books in the California Comedy Series. Just visit the Rafflecopter, and it is at the bottom of this week's show notes page for your chance to enter.
Mm-hmm. Now, coming up in episode 90, we're going to continue with the rest of this interview. We're going to talk to Suzanne, Ed, and Jason a little bit more about what it's like being a creative family and what's coming up next for each of them, including a new movie that they're working on.
Good stuff coming up next week.
Yeah, so be sure to tune in. Until then, guys, keep reading.
For detailed show notes and the complete episode backlist, go to biggayfictionpodcast.com. New episodes are available every Monday on all major podcast distributors and YouTube. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next week.